I'm Ken Paulson with the Free Speech Center and representing the uh, ASNE of today, which is the American Society for News Excellence. And today we want to take a look at an incredibly serious issue involving media that have served America and media that have served the world for a very long time. And we're honored today to have a conversation with Jessica Jarrett, who is the editor on the Press Freedom Desk at Voice of America. Welcome, and we're glad to talk to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So what I wanted to explore with you is not necessarily the political ramifications, of which there are many, but to kind of address what the work you do means to society at large and to the world at large. I will confess that in my own career in journalism, I would get calls, especially when I did work on First Amendment issues from Voice of America, initially not knowing what to make of Voice of America because I knew that Voice of America was a part of the government, and I knew that the counterparts in Russia and elsewhere I didn't entirely trust. And you could talk just a little bit about the construct. How do these media come together under an umbrella, and how is it that you're a news organization as opposed to a propaganda machine?
Of course, and I can understand. I think that's it's actually something that we hear, like Russian and Chinese state media all the time try to equate us similarly to them. But VOA for 83 years has had one purpose. It's more like a public broadcaster model. We're congressionally funded, but through various charters and regulations, we're entirely editorially independent. We have a mission to report objectively, comprehensively, and factually to countries where a free press is in short supply. And we're an antidote to propaganda. By reporting honestly and objectively and critically, we can provide news and views and sources that they can't get elsewhere.
So the people on your staff, all veteran journalists?
Yeah, I mean, not all veteran. We have an amazing expertise. So VOA broadcasts in 49 languages, and we have veteran broadcasters who come from sort of commercial media, your Fox News, CNN, all of like the big names that we think of. And we have an amazing intern program. And what's really unique about us is we broadcast in 49 languages. So many of my colleagues are journalists who maybe grew up in a country that had no free press at all, and they've come into exile or they've found a way legally into the US, and they sort of uphold the First Amendment principles of the US and are able to sort of embody that with their VOA journalism and report back to their audiences back home in a way that they never would have been able to. I'm talking about colleagues from like Russia and Belarus, Vietnam. They would never be able to say the things, do the kind of reporting that we do at VOA in their home countries.
The VOA newsroom, if I'm the editor in Danville, Illinois, my turf is Danville. What is the VOA turf?
Well, a large part of what we try to do is what we call like telling America's story. So it is a lot of US politics and sort of understanding US policy. Through various laws, we're not allowed to broadcast into the US. We're not a competitor for US media. We only broadcast internationally. But it's really helping those audiences in those countries. And we have a weekly global audience of 360 million viewers across all platforms. And just to sort of explain to them the sort of US policy, what's happening at the White House, any of the big stories in the US, and helping them understand how that places. The US is a global leader, and the ramifications here are felt around the world. And VOA journalism is a way to try to explain that in an accessible format to other people.
And where you differ from China and Russia is you report warts and all.
Oh yeah, our very first progress, the very first broadcast that went out during Nazi propaganda was, whether the news is good or bad, we will tell you the truth. And I think that's really what does separate us from propaganda. We have the freedom to go where the story is. We don't shy away from asking tough questions. We have amazing editorial judgment and senior editors who help us with assignments, making sure that we're reporting objectively, independently, and there's no fear.
Your responsibility is the Press Freedom Desk, which they don't have in Danville. And why do you need one and what do you report on?
I mean, my personal belief is that every newsroom should have a press freedom desk. I think it's incredibly important, especially at this moment. So, my team, we report on the challenges confronting media globally, whether that's attacks, threats, online harassment, how news deserts are spreading, and how disinformation is filling is filling that void. And I think more and more in the US, it's a really important concept. For us, it helps create some transparency to our audience, helping them to understand what goes into reporting and why the ethical decisions are made and why why authoritarian governments or hostile actors try to attack and silence media in countries. And I really think it sort of just helps establish the need of the need of a media, the important role that journalists play as a public watchdog.
So, in a world without the voice of America, without Radio Free Europe, without the work of your colleagues, what's the net effect of all losing all of that?
Unfortunately, this is something we saw very quickly after we were put on administrative leave under this executive order on March 15th. We very quickly saw Russian, Chinese, Iranian state media celebrating our absence. For a day or two, there was just silence on the airwaves where we had been broadcasting, and now those media outlets, your CGTNs, your RTs of the world, are filling that space with propaganda, with disinformation. And we've just seen that happen where VOA used to be broadcasting. Now you get propaganda. You don't get news that has this editorial firewall, which is what we have, that prevents any government interference into our newsroom.
So, let's play out what the possible motivations might be for any administration in the US to eliminate Voice of America. I mean, the sense I get is that there's a preference that you would be actually propaganda, the counterpart to the other countries' so-called news services. If that were to happen tomorrow, and I'm confident it would not involve you and your colleagues, but if they were staffing something along those lines, what would be the impact of yet another news agency that isn't one?
I mean, it would damage trust, and I don't want to sort of speculate on motives about why this is happening. And I would recommend anyone who's interested to look at the VOA journalists. Some plaintiff in it have filed a lawsuit talking about executive branch overreach and about the importance of the First Amendment principles. The world right now doesn't need another source of propaganda or pushing an ideology. We need to reestablish trust. We need reliable, accurate information. That we're being drowned out by disinformation and the sort of nefarious attempts to divert the conversation. And having a clear voice like VOA for 83 years, the countries where we reported to, we were probably, in many cases, the only trusted source of information. That's an 83-year legacy that at the moment has been silenced, and the audiences desperately need us. Since we've been off air, for instance, our VOA Burmese service, there was the 7.7 point earthquake in Myanmar, and people were looking for where we are. Why isn't VOA Burmese service there reporting about what's happening and seeing disinformation, not knowing where to turn to? We've been a constant voice in that market in that country through the Rohingya genocide, through the coup, through everything that's happened in between. And likewise with Afghanistan, where the return of the Taliban has changed the whole landscape there, has decimated media, but VOA was able to ramp up its broadcasts and not just news there, but providing vital information on health, on education, reaching women and girls who are blocked from society and trying to provide them with more than just news, but with a source, giving them a voice in some cases to be able to talk about what's happening. I mean, this is sort of what we're talking about. It's hard in the US, where a lot of people don't know VOA, to understand, we take a free press for granted here. but to really understand what it can mean if you're a young woman in Afghanistan who's now blocked out of society and through our VOA Afghan service was able to connect with the outside world, tell people what's happening, or access health and education materials that are now illegal for you to do that. That was the point of VOA. That is why we're also desperate to get back into the newsroom. We know our audiences need us.
Jessica, you make the case beautifully. I think just stepping back, where we stand is the reason Americans don't know VOA is because you're not allowed to broadcast here or disseminate your content. But in truth, it's paid for by the US and has been for decades because it has makes a real difference around the world, both in terms of US interests, but also in interests of the people around the world, independent of our interests. And because it's staffed by professional journalists, journalism is honest and has integrity. And because it has integrity, it's trusted and accessed by more than 300 million people. Um, it if I were on a jury, it would be open and shut. I appreciate the time you spent. We want to share this as widely as possible so people understand what the stakes are. But for the time being, thank you for what you're doing and thank you for what you've done. It's so critical of the world and to journalism as a whole.
Thank you so much for your time.